Welcome to MCN and welcome to a series of videos where we dive into a year or so of ownership of our long-term test fleet. So today we have got Gareth and we have got a Ninja 650, but that's not the only bike that we're sort of talking about today, is it, Gareth?
No, it's not. No. I started 2024 with the aspiration actually to try the Ninja Hybrid. So the Ninja 7 Hybrid is a petrol bike with a 13 kilogram battery attached to the motor. So it's a hybrid, just like all these hybrid cars, but it's the first production hybrid motorcycle. That and the Z Hybrid, the naked version came out at the same time. So I thought, I love a bit of tech, and I thought, do you know what, I've got to give this a go. I've got to see what this hybrid's all about and see if it actually makes any kind of sense in the real world.
And before we get into your likes and dislikes on the hybrid, does it?
I struggled a little bit with it, I've got to be honest, but in its defence, there are a lot of claims that Kawasaki made about it that raised a few eyebrows, certainly in the office, and we did put those to the test. And I think it's fair to say that it passed the test, but we can go into that in a sec.
So, you know, there's been a lot of chatter online about the hybrids, about EVs, stuff like that. We sort of really wanted to put it to the test, see if it could, you know, back up all of the claims, see if it could be something that you'd want to live with and see if it's worth the relatively high asking price as well. So starting with the hybrid, we're going to start with your likes. We'll get the good stuff out of the way first before we delve into the dirt. So likes, you've put that it's easy.
Yeah. It's really easy to ride. So you can just jump on it and effectively just twist and go. There's an automatic mode. So you don't actually have to change gear at all if you don't want to. You can just potter around. It's very easy. If you've got, for example, if you've got problems with your legs, it's bang on for that. Yeah. It's an accessible bike, you know, yeah.
And then when you go on there to say about auto and manual, did you like having the choice of being able to switch between the two? Did you use them both equally?
Yeah, you know what, I did. Particularly when I was on sort of longer rides and I was heading into the city for a little bit, I would actually switch it into automatic mode when I'm in traffic or like filtering through traffic and stuff like that. And then when I get out onto a B road, switch it back into manual and have some fun on it. So it's nice to have that kind of, those options. And the third option you've got as well is actually to switch it into just electric mode. You only get like a handful of miles really in electric mode, but it's proper silent, like really quiet, and there are some advantages to that as well, particularly at 4 a.m. when you don't want to wake your neighbours up, that sort of thing. The disadvantage, of course, is that you're so quiet in town that people can't hear you and they just walk straight out in front of you, and I experienced that quite a few times.
And obviously you've ridden for many years. As you can see, he's ridden in today in this horrible, dirty, cold January sort of, I don't even know what it is, almost like a storm, isn't it?
Yeah.
Did you find it easy to sort of, adapt to that straight away, to almost have it as like second nature rather than always changing gear to go between auto and manual and electric? Did that just come naturally to you?
No, not at all. But I don't think that that's really a fault of the way I was approaching it as much as it's actually quite difficult on that bike to switch between the modes, but we'll go into that again in a sec.
So you've then gone on to walk mode. Can you tell us, A, what that is, and B, why you like it?
Yeah, so again, it's another advantage of having an electric bike, and it's proper necessary on the hybrid because the hybrid weighs 227 kilograms. It's a hefty bit of kit, and it's not particularly wieldy in sort of confined spaces either. What that means is that it's actually quite a struggle to move it around. So what Kawasaki have done is they've given it a walk mode, which is a ultra low speed mode. You've got forward and reverse modes, just for walking the bike around.
Which is purely from the electric motor.
It's purely from the electric motor, and it takes some of the stress out of that kind of just trying to get the bike around.
And on the flip side, the opposite of walk mode, you've put down as one of your likes, acceleration.
Yeah, because as I said, Kawasaki claimed that the Ninja 7 Hybrid would accelerate as fast from a standstill as a supersport bike. So,
That's bold. That is bold,
It's
isn't
bold,
it?
isn't it?
Yeah.
So we put that to the test. So what we did was we actually got Kawasaki's Supersport bike, the ZX-10R Ninja, and we put it on a runway against the Ninja 7 Hybrid, and we speed tested both of them with full data logging equipment. Bruce Dunn did the speed testing, our resident speed tester, everything done the same day, same conditions, everything was the same. Up to 30 miles an hour, the hybrid was quicker.
Wow, yeah.
Yeah, we think, to paraphrase what Bruce thought about that, he thought that the reason that it was so much quicker was actually because Kawasaki have managed to really configure the electronics, well, the electrical output from the motor and the petrol motor so carefully together that it was just optimized for acceleration, for digging in. Whereas the ZX-10 was spinning up it could spin up its rear wheel. You struggle for traction with that much horsepower.
Yeah.
With the hybrid, it was kind of just optimized for that. And also, because you've got the battery so far back on the bike, it gives you that squat effect that drag racers love.
It's got such a long wheelbase as well.
It's got a massive wheelbase, yeah. So, those things really worked in its favour up to 30 miles an hour. But then, don't get me wrong, after 30 miles an hour, it was no contest whatsoever.
So, obviously, we talked about acceleration, we talked about sort of the performance of the hybrid, but one of the big things that people will be looking for if they're going to go and buy this thing is range, and you've put that down as something that you really like about that bike.
Yeah, I mean, again, we're going back to Kawasaki's claims here, but Kawasaki claimed that it had the running costs, ergo fuel economy, of a 250. So it's roughly the performance of a 700, 750 when all things are considered, but the running cost of a 250 bike. So I had to put that to the test. I spent a frankly horrendous day hypermiling the bike, so trying to get as much fuel economy, as better fuel economy as I could, as much range from a tank of fuel as humanly possible. A tank of fuel and I suppose a tank of sparks, because I ran the fuel tank completely dry and the battery completely dead. It's got two batteries actually, worth saying that. It's got two batteries, it's got 12 volt as well, like a conventional 12 volt battery, so you can always reignite the bike once you put fuel in it again.
It doesn't just kill it completely.
It doesn't just kill it completely, so you're not ever going to be stuck on the side of the road. However, I ran it completely out of fuel. And I did, 2 laps of our little Rutland TT route that we do, that Rich Newland liked so much. And then a little bit more sort of closer to home, so I felt a bit more comfortable with my surroundings to run it out completely. And in its defence, it did 270 point something miles to 14 litres of fuel. Yeah. So that's quite a small fuel tank.
That's a small tank, and that is a lot of mileage.
Yeah. It did also highlight the frustration of the refuelling light coming on, what felt like 3 years before it actually ran out of fuel as well. So, you've got a lot of headroom once that refuelling light comes on. But, I was pretty impressed with that. And actually, they don't sell a 250 in the UK, but when you do compare like for like in terms of a 250 fuel economy versus the Ninja Hybrid, it did beat it. So we put the fuel economy figures on the screen, but it did the job. So it's ticked both the boxes that Kawasaki claim in terms of its figures. So
that's fair enough, and that sort of covers off the good points. But now we're gonna hit the dislike button, aren't we? So actually, before we get started, do you want to tell our dear viewers why we're not standing over a hybrid right now?
Yes, because in September I had an email from Kawasaki, and it had quite a lot of words on it, but the words that really jumped out of the page were "do not ride." So Kawasaki recalled the bike. They recalled all of them. And they told us to stop riding immediately and, don't get back on it. They're going to come and pick it up and it's going to go away and have a fix implemented on it. So what Kawasaki claimed was the issue was that the bike's jumping out of gear between first and second.
Okay,
Which is a bit of a problem because when you're
pulling away from the lights,
pulling away from the lights, any kind of low speed maneuver, it's going to jump out of gear. You're going to lose power when you're not expecting it, which could kind of put you in danger. So that's a bit of an issue. Now, I never experienced that. What I did experience was it jumping out of gear in the higher gears. So it would jump out of fifth gear. It would sometimes jump out of fourth gear as well. And this problem seemed to almost be getting worse the more I kind of rode on the bike as well. So in those situations, when you're overtaking at speed, you know, you're losing motive power. That's actually quite a big problem. And I wasn't entirely surprised when I heard that they recalled the bike. So yeah, the bike went away.
Well, that obviously covers off the first of your dislikes as well with the gear change, and you know it's not a cheap bike anyway. I know there's a lot of tech on it, but that's really interesting that you put that down as an actual dislike. So was it purely on the basis that you sort of didn't trust it, or was it on the actual feel of the gear changes that you
No,
didn't like?
it wasn't just that I didn't trust it. First of all, the trigger to change gear is right next to the headlight trigger, and yes, you get used to it. No, you don't really want to have to. It's quite annoying when you're flashing your headlights at someone and you're trying to change gear. There's a thumb to change down gear, so that wasn't a problem, but it's changing up the box. You tend to do that. But the other side of it is as well, in automatic mode, it is almost hilariously jerky. Like, because of the automated manual, it doesn't just go snap into the next gear. It goes like that,
yeah.
and your head goes back and your head goes forward. It's not the comfiest experience I've ever had.
Well, you'd expect it to be soft on a bike like that as well, wouldn't you?
Yeah, you would. And the other side of it is, you had electric. I kind of understand why, but you've got electric only in the first 4 gears. So because drag increases at the square of speed, what you don't want is electric power in the higher gears, because you're actually going to lose the range so quickly that it's almost going to become impossible to use. So there's that side of things. The other side of things is that I really wish, and this kind of goes to another point that I've got on there about modes, but I really wish you had sport mode with manual and then you had automatic mode with eco. I wanted sport mode in automatic, because one of the things that they've done in some of the hybrid performance cars, for example, is they use torque fill from the battery to fill in between gear changes. So actually it becomes much more of a linear curve and you get really exciting acceleration. I wanted that. I thought that would be a real kind of improvement to the dynamics of the bike, but yet. So gear box, I think, probably rather than what I've written, which is gear change. But yeah, it was. I think there's a bit of configuration work to be done there.
Yeah, and obviously there's so many other manufacturers that have got their own sort of different takes on gearboxes at the moment. It's there's a lot of competition going about, isn't there?
Yeah.
Now we're moving on to comfort, which is a really interesting one because it doesn't look like a sort of like anything that's too sporty or too aggressive. Why did you put down comfort as a dislike?
I'm pretty confident that the reason that it's so uncomfortable is because it's got that battery so far back behind the engine, and what they've had to do is spring it so hard that it's just uncomfortable. The rear wheel feels like it's going all over the place quite a lot of the time. It doesn't really feel as compliant as it could do. On longer journeys, it was pretty horrible, And the long swing arm doesn't help either. It's just the whole thing just didn't seem to be packaged in a way that made for a comfortable motorcycle.
Yeah, fair enough. So next we've got the wilderness.
Wilderness, yeah.
Wilderness.
Wilderness.
Talk us through that.
I've already alluded to this when I was talking about walk mode, but walk mode is like an essential with that bike because it is vast, 165 millimeters longer than a Ninja 500, which it borrows its engine from.
Yeah.
So it is really long, and because of that turning circle, the size of Jupiter, it's really difficult to get it in between between cars when you're coming out your drive or something like that, and wheeling it around your around my garage and stuff like that. So it was an unwieldy thing, and coupled with the 227 kilograms as well, it was just like, do you know what? It's just hard work. And the other side of that is the walk mode. We'll come on to it again in a minute with the modes, but it wasn't the easiest thing to find.
Yeah,
So.
and that is a lot of bike when you consider that it's almost sort of pitched as like a lower capacity middleweight in a sense, isn't it?
Yeah.
So next, we're moving on to the suspension and brakes. Now, before we get into this, I think we should say it's not exactly a cheap motorcycle, is it? So what do you make of the suspension and the braking setup?
I think it could have, again, it just felt built to a price, which is such a shame. Kawasaki say that this is a bike that would really suit kind of early adopters. And some of it kind of stands up to that kind of scrutiny, and some of it really doesn't. And the suspension and brakes were two of those things. The suspension, yes, it was firmly sprung on the rear, but there's no adjustment on the front forks either. There, you don't get upside down forks or anything like that. It was just a little bit kind of subpar, where I think if someone's spending north of 12 grand on a bike, they're kind of going to expect a little bit of kind of premium to go along with that investment. So, yeah.
Yeah, they spanked all their budget on the battery and the technology. And finally, modes and performance.
Yeah, so modes, I've mentioned this a few times already, but it was just hard work switching through the modes. It was quite hard work understanding them in the first instance and getting used to the bike. But even once I was used to it, quite often you have to stop, hold buttons down to change modes, and what you really want is to change mode and crack on.
Yeah.
So that was hard work. The performance side of things was really interesting because, as I said earlier on, you kind of got to 30 miles an hour. And yes, the ZX10 went off into the distance, you'd expect that. But also, it's only a little 500 engine in a 227 kilogram bike. What actually happens is it feels almost like you're hitting a wall of air when you start picking up speed, but also it's buzzing away like you wouldn't believe underneath you.
It's
like,
working hard.
Yeah, you really feel like that. I felt sorry for that 500 engine, honestly, because it was buzzing its nuts off, and you can feel it, like a high frequency vibration right the way through you when you're doing it. It's it felt like it was really working.
It's an odd choice, isn't it? It's almost like an odd choice of an engine to put in that with the weight and the size. And
it is, yeah. I wrote actually in one of my updates in MCN. I really think that this would make much more sense upscaled a little bit.
Yes.
To something with more performance as standard, and then try and sort of optimize for that rather than having this kind of what felt like a bit of a compromise, particularly at that price point.
Yeah. Oh, that's really interesting. So just to sort of summarize it, would you sort of rate your experience with the hybrid as positive or negative? And that's coming from someone who's got a lot of experience in bikes, cars, technology. Like, how would you rate it, and was it what you expected?
It was interesting, but I'm not going to say it's positive. I can't say it's positive because the bike never came back. They spent a long time with the bike trying to fix the recall for the software. Sorry, and it didn't come back. So I can't say it's a positive outcome, unfortunately. But kudos to Kawasaki for trying it. You know what? It exists, it's a thing, no one else has done it. So at least they're trying to do something to mitigate the impact of these ever sort of tightening emissions regulations and try and sort of keep us on two wheels with some kind of internal combustion for as long as possible. Not everyone wants an electric bike, and if this is a stepping stone between the two things to keep us, with sort of petrol motive power for a little bit longer, then you have to appreciate its existence, if not its execution.
Sweet. And then obviously before the hybrid arrived, and once the hybrid went, you were left with Ninja 650.
Yeah, little Ninja 650. You know what? I've grown to quite like this bike. I've grown to quite like it. Well, we'll go into the whys and wherefores in a sec, but I've grown to quite like it despite the fact that it's barely changed from the ER6. It's just continued to move on with iterative improvements.
Isn't it?
Yeah, marginal gains, but you know what? It feels a bit old school because of that, and I quite like it.
So before we get kicked off with the likes and dislikes, what was your immediate feeling jumping first time from the hybrid onto this? Did you instantly feel like you were just way more at home? Did it feel better? Did you sort of miss anything about the hybrid? How did you feel jumping on this after the hybrid?
Jumping on this after the hybrid, kind of a sigh of relief in a lot of ways. Much comfier, when sometimes you sit on a bike and the suspension just goes, like that, and you're like, yeah, okay, this is a better thing. And it was literally back to back. I got off the hybrid onto this.
Okay, yeah.
So really noticed the difference with that. And then I clicked it into gear with my foot. Brilliant.
Yeah.
That's absolute. Felt like Christmas had come early. And then I pulled out of the parking space I was in, and it turned. And that was different. So, yeah, I mean, it's just getting back on well, you could say conventional or proper motorcycle was a very nice thing after the hybrid experience.
So we'll get stuck straight in. Obviously, you had the standard bike and the performance as well, which are slightly different. So we'll sort of do both of them at the same time because they're not massively different. It's just an extra pack, isn't it?
Yeah.
So firstly, the riding position.
Yeah. So this is a Ninja, but it's not a sports bike. You've got the ZX6 and even the ZX4, which is closest to the price point of this. They're sports bikes. They're much sportier. They're much more track ready, track focused or performance riding focused. This, you just get on and it's just comfortable, You just get on it and it's just a nice place to be. It's really nicely ergonomically suited to me, really. You're not crouching at all, really. The bar position's quite high, but it has got a fairing as well. So it's quite a nice sort of combination of things,
Super neutral, isn't it? When you look at how high the bars are, how sort of low the seat is, the foot pegs, everything just sort of made to be cozy, isn't it?
Exactly, yeah. Yeah, and it kind of like, it's in no way intimidating. You just want to get on it.
Yeah.
It's a nice thing.
And then we're going to go to the comfort seat. So how is that? Does that come with the performance pack, and how different is that to the standard seat, or is that just an update?
No, the comfort seat, I believe, is now standard on this bike.
Nice.
But it is a much nicer thing than the bike I had at the start of 2024.
Yep.
It's a lot comfier. And as we all know, comfort on bikes is quite an important part of your enjoyment of riding a bike.
Yeah.
So it's not distracting in any way, whereas the previous one just felt like it was just a little bit wooden,
Yeah. And then we're getting on to new tyres.
Yep. Blimey, that was the single biggest difference I noticed. Now, the new tyres, I believe, are on all of these bikes from now. Wasn't on the bike I had early 2024, but these are Dunlop Road Sport 2s, and they're kind of night and day. They've changed the way the bike feels.
Yep.
It feels so much lighter than the earlier one, much more nimble. It's the turn-in is much more assured, communicative, predictable.
Yep.
We know that changing tyres on a bike often yields some pretty surprising results, but these feel so nicely matched to this bike. And huge upgrade. Really good.
Yeah, especially for an OE tyre to make such a difference between the previous OE tyre. That's quite a big change, isn't it?
Yeah.
We're going on to the performance exhaust.
Yeah, Arrow exhaust from the engine all the way back, which is kind of cool. It's got kind of a bit of carbon fibre stuff on it as well. I'd imagine it makes the bike a little bit lighter, although I haven't weighed it, so I don't know that. But what it really does is kind of liven that engine up and give you a bit more of the sort of emotional attachment to the bike that the standard 650 doesn't have.
Yeah.
And for me, that makes quite a big difference.
Yeah.
I feel like it's the kind of the mixture of noise and vibration. It makes it feel like much more of an event for me.
Yes.
The induction noise hasn't changed.
Yeah.
It's great, the induction noise, but when it's joined with the exhaust noise, that really kind of completes the package for me. It sort of squares the circle. Is that the right phrase? But yeah, it makes.
Especially anything sporty, it sort of needs a bit of noise and a bit of presence, doesn't it?
Exactly. It makes it feel more like a Ninja, I think it's fair to say. Yeah.
And then controls.
Yeah, so I actually ended up riding quite a few Kawasaki's last year, and they've all got this one thing in common, which is they're all the controls are all nicely configured. They're nicely tactile, nice brake feel, both front and rear brakes. The gearbox, it just snicks into gear really nicely, even with 0 miles on the clock. It just all feels really nicely resolved and really nicely put together, and yeah, well configured. It feels like it's been configured by people that really know what they're doing. Whereas I did ride some other bikes, most notably some of the cheaper Hondas, where a lot of it felt really wooden. The switchgear felt quite cheap, and this is less that and more I think premium proposition than some rivals.
You can see just how clean and simple it is, can't you? It's just so nice rather than just a sea of everything everywhere.
Yeah.
Now we're getting on to the dislikes. The engine.
Yeah, it's just a parallel twin, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a parallel twin with 68 horsepower. It's not going to set anyone's hair on fire. Hopefully, but they do an A2 version, and so it's great for that market. And yeah, it could just be a little bit more interesting in a lot of different ways. I wish it revved higher. I wish it had more power. I wish it sounded better, even with the exhaust. I wish, but it is a cheap bike.
That's the thing, isn't it? In this sort of new age of like the softer sports, the sub 100 horsepower category now, it has been left behind a bit. When it was just the CBR 650R and this, they were sort of they were the only two, but now you've got so much competition in it that have just upped the game.
Yeah.
And talking of which, handling.
Yeah, again, we've got the same problem as the hybrid, same setup as the hybrid in terms of right side up forks, non-adjustable at the front, and even the rear shock. It just doesn't feel as well configured as it perhaps could.
Yeah.
Yeah.
App,
Rideology app, yes. Struggled with this quite a lot. So I just can't get it to work properly. It's got a tracking mode on it, so you can track your rides. Brilliant. Never worked for me. I found it quite difficult to get it set up in the first place as well. My phone seems to forget the connection at times. And I don't know, it just doesn't seem to work particularly well. But then again, I mean, this screen's quite old. And that feels quite outdated now.
Yeah.
And you control it all through some controls on the bars that, I don't know, like it just feels like a decade old. It feels like the whole thing just needs updating to modern smartphone technology and just connecting straight away and it just works. You know, that would be a cool thing.
So we're going to keep it a little bit electronic. ABS.
Yeah.
I believe you did a bit of a test on this as well, didn't you?
Yeah. So we did a bit of experimentation for a road safety video about braking, and I was trying to compare with this very bike, the performance of just using the front brake doing an emergency stop, just using the rear brake, and then using both brakes together to see the difference in braking distances. Regardless of all that, you know, I mean, it was the results were as you'd expect. Both brakes were the best, then the front brake, then the rear brake. So, you know, no surprises there. The surprise was particularly when I was using just the front brake, it allows you to do some massive stoppies that it just almost doesn't feel safe. You know, like the ABS takes an age to kick in. You get the back wheel right up in the air, then it kicks in, the back wheel slams down, but then it lets off again because it's ABS. So it
fires the lever out towards,
Exactly. So, yeah, the result, particularly for that experiment, was quite eye-opening to say the least, yeah.
I think as well, we're spoilt now with what bikes come with the IMUs, with the quarter-in ABS, with how refined, especially a lot of the European brands are just, the ABS is incredible, you can barely feel it. And when you jump on something that has got the old school sort of systems on it, it just doesn't quite cut the mustard anymore, does it?
No, and I dread to think what would happen if I pulled that hard in a corner.
Yeah. And we're going to finish off with the final thing. It's sort of, you know, sticking on a sort of similar point. You've just put premium.
Yeah, premium. I mean, blimey, it's an expensive bike as it is. It's nudging to, 7,500 quid as standard.
Yeah.
The premium for the performance pack is another £1,000 on top of that.
Yeah.
And, you know, just start to list the bikes you're starting to look at that price point. And you're like, well, it's starting to get difficult to swallow. It really is. You
sort of feel like it's about time that this could do with a really hefty update, isn't it?
Yeah, it really does need it now. Yeah, I mean, EOS X, great. But I think, maybe it's time to move on a little bit.
So actually that's been really interesting because there's been a lot to like and a lot to dislike about both bikes. So just a couple of quick fire questions. Which one did you prefer and enjoy the most?
Ninja 650, performance.
Would you buy either of these bikes?
No. I think the Ninja 650 performance is too expensive for what it is, so I'd probably end up with one of the rival bikes.
That's really interesting, and obviously you run a Yamaha R7 as a long-timer when it came out. Would you take that over one of these?
Every day of the week. Wouldn't even think about it.
Wow. Well, that's really interesting. As always, if you'd like to see more of this sort of content, more of our long-term videos, more features, road tests, all that sort of stuff, please make sure you subscribe, hit the like button, and leave any comments below, whether they're good or bad.